again, everyone. Welcome to my channel, From Dream to Seed. My name is Jessica, and if you're a beginning gardener, you have come to the right place for easy to follow tips and tricks that will get you growing. This is video number 6 in my beginner gardener series, and today I'm going to be talking all about container gardening. So in my first video in this series, I went into quite a bit of depth about some of the reasons that you may want to try container gardening, but in case you missed that video, here's a refresher. Container gardening is great if you do not have a yard. Maybe you live in an apartment or you just have a small patio and you want to grow some flowers and fruits and vegetables, but you don't have the yard to put a raised bed or an in-ground garden, then container gardening is a really good option for you. Also, if you have a very shaded yard and you just have a few little areas of sun, then a container garden is really great because you can move that container to sort of chase the sun throughout the day. Another option for container gardening is if you're wanting to grow things that are not tolerant of winters in your growing zone. So for example, I live in growing zone 6B, and if I want to grow citrus trees or tropical plants, I have to put them in containers because they will not survive our winter. So first, I thought I'd show you a few of the things that I like to grow in containers and why I choose to grow them in containers. Then I'm going to give you a few easy to follow tips that will help you grow in containers successfully. And then my son and I are going to be planting his pepper garden, so I thought I'd take you along for that. So this is my herb garden, and I grow this in a container because I like to grow it on my raised deck, and this is right outside my kitchen door, and so it's convenient if I'm cooking to come out and grab some herbs. And so I have some chives, thyme, cilantro, dill, basil, and I have a little bit of parsley just starting to come up. And another reason I like to grow some of these herbs in a container is because they can be a little invasive, some of these perennial herbs. So for instance, the chives and oregano, if you're growing oregano, if you have that in ground or in a raised bed, they can start to spread everywhere. And maybe that's what you want, but for me, I don't want that. So I like to keep these things in a container. Another one is mint, and this is a really cute little mint growing kit that my husband got me for Mother's Day, and it's just starting to sprout. But mint is a really invasive plant, and if you've ever made the mistake of planting mint in your garden, I totally have, you will know that it goes everywhere. It even started to tunnel underneath my raised beds and up in my yard. It took me forever to get it out. So mint is something that you definitely want to grow in a container. So another type of plant that I always grow in containers are any kind of plant that will not survive our winters. And this is one of several succulents that I keep in the house. And these would not survive winters in zone 6B, which is what I'm in. So I have to bring these indoors, usually starting in October, and then I will not move them back out until about mid to late May. I also have 2 larger tropical plants that I will show you now. So here I have a plumeria and a calamondin orange tree, and these would definitely not survive the winter in my zone. So these are 2 plants that I need to bring in during the winter. They actually have to go under grow lights. Both of these had a pretty epic battle with spider mites this winter, so they're looking a little rough, but they are bouncing back. But right now I am sort of acclimating them to the sun again, and so in about a week they'll be ready to come out full time. So here are some berry plants that I have growing in containers. I have 2 blueberries, and then I also have a few strawberries growing in containers. And berry plants do really well in containers. In fact, there's a lot of berry varieties that are actually created for growing in containers. I believe Bushel and Berry has quite a few. And I most certainly can grow berries in ground in my area. However, I recently had my soil tested, and if you haven't checked out my video about soil testing, I'll link it up above. But my soil is still too alkaline to plant these blueberry bushes in the ground. Blueberries prefer a soil pH of 4.5 to roughly 5.5, and my pH is still in the mid-7s, so way too high. So right now I have these blueberries and strawberries growing in containers, and they're doing really well. I just have to make sure that I'm adding a little bit of sulfur to the potting mix to keep the soil acidic enough for them to grow. So now let's talk about a few things you can do to help your container gardening be more successful. And first I want to talk about the container itself. I want to talk about the size of the container, the drainage of the container, and the material that the container is made of. So let's talk about size first. When you are growing anything that's going to be perennial, coming back year after year, I really suggest that you get at least a 20-inch pot, and this will allow for that plant to grow as big as it needs to. So all of my orange tree, my plumeria, my herb garden, and my blueberries are all in at least 20-inch pots. If you like to grow a lot of vegetables, like say tomatoes, you're going to want to at least have a 5-gallon bucket. Those are really popular to grow tomatoes in. But that brings me to my next point, and that is drainage. All of your pots need to have drainage holes at the bottom, including your indoor pots. So you want to make sure that if you're planting, it has at least a large drainage hole, if not several drainage holes in the bottom. And if it doesn't have drainage holes, then whip out that drill and put more of them in the bottom, especially if you're growing in 5-gallon buckets. Now, I know you're worried about the water leaking out everywhere, especially if you have indoor plants, but there's a lot of solutions for that. So I got these at the dollar store. They're just really simple little collection trays that you can put under your plants. I have also, for my larger plants, I have used the trays that you slide under animal cages to collect droppings and shavings and things, and those work really, really well for larger plants. And next, let's talk about the material of the plant. I personally don't have a preference of the material that my pot is actually made of. There is some credibility to tropical and especially desert plants in terracotta pots. The terracotta pots are very porous. They let a lot of air and moisture in and out. So I would say that those are a really great option if you're growing tropical or especially desert plants. Also, another fairly new method are grow bags, and these are actually, they're pretty big. They're 30-gallon grow bags, and I'm going to be putting sweet potatoes in these, and they're really great for vegetables because this is a porous material, and so water will not collect too much in these grow bags. So this is another really great option for material. So now let's talk about one of the biggest mistakes you can make in container gardening, and that is putting actual soil into your containers. You never want to put soil into your containers. You will end up with cement for a growing medium. If you put soil into a container, you won't have that normal expansion and contraction or movement with the earthworms in that container, and the soil will really harden and make it extremely difficult for your plants to grow. So you never want to put soil from your yard or anything that says garden soil into those containers. You always want to get something that says potting mix. Now, a lot of times you might hear the term potting soil, and that's actually a mistake. Potting mix has no soil in it. So it's made from organic materials such as peat moss, coconut coir, vermiculite, perlite, a few other things. And it is a very well draining and very loose material that potted plants can grow into really, really well. And I'm not brand specific, I just wanted to show you a few examples of what to use and what not to use. So this is for in-ground use, or you can definitely mix it with organic material to put in raised beds, but never in containers by itself. So there are a few specific potting soils that you can use. This is a potting soil that I use for my succulents. It has a lot of I think it's perlite in it. Perlite that drains really, really well. And so my succulents really enjoy this because succulents don't like to be overwatered. I have also used a citrus potting soil for my orange tree, and it's done really, really well. Another great tip for container gardening is to mulch. Now, a lot of people don't think to mulch in containers, but let me tell you, it's a really, really, really good thing to do because potting soil drains so fast. I know many of you have probably grown tomatoes or flowers in the summer and you're having to go out and water 2-3 times a day sometimes. So if you mulch, and I have mulched with pine needles, I just kind of like the way they look, but it will keep the soil moist a lot longer and it will keep the soil cooler, and that will really cut back on your having to water so much. So here's a few more tips that I have found really helpful for container gardening. Number one is that you will find that you will probably have to water and to fertilize a little bit more often in your containers than you would for your in-ground or your raised beds. And that's just because the water is moving through that potting material so much faster than it would be in your other types of gardens. Another tip is if you have plants that are like trees or citrus trees or tropical plants that are staying in those containers year after year, it's a really good idea every maybe 2 or 3 years to give that pot fresh potting soil, or to give that plant fresh potting soil. And that's because salts from the fertilizers can really build up. It can kind of lose its nutrients after a while too. So a few times I've noticed my citrus tree really struggling, and so I gave it fresh potting mix, watered it in, gave it some fresh fertilizer, and it usually bounces back pretty well. So now I'm going to take you over with my son, and we're going to show you how we're going to pot up his pepper garden for this year. So this is my son Reese, and he told me that he wanted to grow a pepper garden this year, and anything to get him outside and off electronics, right? Yeah. So we are going to be putting peppers in containers on our retaining wall, and I think we have 6 different kinds. What kinds do we have?
Tabasco, chili, bell, ghost pepper,
and peppercini, and a peach habanero, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what made you want to grow peppers?
Because I want to eat them.
You don't think they're going to be too hot?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay.
Not if I mix them with chili.
Okay, we're going to show you how we're going to plant up his pepper garden. So thanks everyone for joining us today on our video about container gardening. And please leave us any likes or comments. And what do we say at the end? Please subscribe.
Sure.
Reese says please subscribe. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye. The struggle of filming in a neighborhood because I am constantly battling lawnmowers.